Ampetawashte Midapi Epi, Machiapi, Machiapi, Lena, Shatanga Lakota, Imataha. Chante Washte Nape Chayuzapo. Good day, relatives. I am Cheryl Crazybowl, the President and CEO of the American Indian College Fund. I am Shichango Lakota from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, and I just welcome all of you to our Indigenous Activism Speaker Series. I greet you with a good heart and a handshake, and I look forward to sharing the really wonderful speakers that we have here with us today. When the COVID-19 first hit, and then we had all of the incredible racial and social justice activism that happened, the College Fund had issued a statement of solidarity with our African American and other people of color and our allies to indicate that we really support and are active around the issues of equity and racial justice in this country and the issues of social justice and all the different parts of that. And we remain very concerned at the College Fund about the ability of our people to participate in very critical aspects of the American democracy, like the census or like the opportunity to vote. And so the College Fund has dedicated then some of our time and our resources to not only making statements of solidarity, but actually doing something about it. So one of the things that we decided to do was to host a series of Indigenous speakers who could talk about the different ways that we as Native people, and particularly Native students, could be activists in a variety of ways in our communities. It's been a really great opportunity for us to be able to really help people share their voices, use their voices to create equity for our people. I just want to take a moment here as we get ready to hear our amazing speakers today to really ground us in our relationship with the Creator, to remind us when I think about really the responsibilities and the teachings that we have as Indigenous peoples. It's really rooted in our understanding that the Creator and creation is what motivates us. It's what helps us be in place with each other, and to really like to also, offer a prayer for our people who are out in our communities, really doing the hard work of taking care of our families. Those people who are experiencing perhaps economic challenges, people who are really dealing with, illnesses, people who are struggling with issues around just the general well-being of people in their communities. So I really want to offer up a prayer for them and ask that the Creator help them find all the resources that they need. It's a particularly trying time for our people as we get ready to go back to school in some form or the other. And I know a lot of our people are really, hopeful that our children will still be able to get a quality education. And I believe we can. I just wanted to, say that real quickly before we move on to our speakers. I'll introduce them. You'll have the opportunity, all of you who are participating in the Q&A or the chat, to ask questions of our speakers after they've done their presentation. So just a quick reminder about that. But thinking about our children and the families, we as Indigenous people have always educated our own people. That's part of our responsibility. And although it's really challenging in this time to do that, we can give our kids the education that they need, both as an Indigenous person, getting that Indigenous education, but also I just want to say that, it's about to succeed in American schooling. It's about reading, being able to read. It's about learning math. And those are things that we can teach as parents. They can get algebra later. They can get all those harder things later. But we as parents, especially of young children, can really help them with those skills by doing the reading. So today, we're going to talk about disrupting the system from within, and I'm just so happy to have two individuals joining us who've had media, legal, and legislative strategies that they've worked with for change. We're going to enjoy a brief presentation from each of them and then have some discussion with them about how they were able to continue to focus on changing from within. Carly Badhart-Bull, who is Flandreau, Santee Sioux, and Muskogee Creek, is the Executive Director of Native Waste Federation. Native Waste Federation is a national organization of 7 of the leading nonprofits, Native nonprofits in the country. The responsibility that she has is to really amplify the voice of Native peoples and Native nonprofits in the philanthropic community, so that resources can be brought to our communities to do really the work of social and racial justice, which is just really broad. So I think that we're really happy that she's in that role. Prior to coming to to the Native Waste Federation, she was a program officer at the Bush Foundation. Bush Foundation does kind of the northern tier of the United States, and within that there are 23 Native nations that she worked with. She's also worked as an attorney in the field of child welfare and as a Dakota language teacher. So I'm really proud that she brings those skills to not only her family, but to her community. She has spent 5 years working with her family and community. Many of you may have heard this, to restore the Dakota name, Pidimakaska, to the largest lake in Minneapolis, formerly known as Lake Calhoun. So she'll be sharing some of that story with us. She has a JD from the University of Minnesota Law School, a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Minnesota, and also an associate degree. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband Jay and her young son Quill. Kevin Killer is our second guest. Kevin is a member of the Oglala Lakota and Kiowa nations. He served 10 years in the South Dakota legislature, representing a district that includes the Pine Ridge Reservation. He's the co-founder of Advanced Native Political Leadership, which seeks to train the next generation of Native leaders to run, manage, and lead successful campaigns at all levels of government. And I just really am proud of him and the work that he's done. He also has a fellowship with the Open Society Foundation Leadership and Government Program, working on truth and healing in Native communities. Kevin attended Oglala Lakota College, which is a tribal college on the Pine Ridge Reservation. He was the first tribal college fellow of a progressive youth development organization, Young People For. Kevin expanded Young People For to create a very wonderful independent Native-led organization called the Native Youth Leadership Alliance, which is now 11 years old. He serves on the board of the People for the American Way Foundation, and his past service includes the National Indian Education Association, the Oglala Lakota College Board of Trustees, the Young Elected Officials Network, the Quad Caucus, and the National Caucus of Native American State Legislators. He was also a 2015 Bush Fellow, so both he and Carly have a strong connection to the Bush Foundation, which is a really excellent supporter of Native tribes and of nonprofits. So we've decided that Carly will be the first presenter, and when she's done with her presentation, Kevin will do his, that I'll get back on and we'll have a discussion as a group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And thank you everyone at the College Fund. Thank you, Kevin. Excited to be here. Hami Takuyipi, Carly Badhart-Bull, Emakiapie, He Washichuya, Dakotia, Tokada Kiamaniwi, Emakiapie. So I said hello, everyone, friends and relatives. In English, my name is Carly Badhart-Bull, and in Dakota, my name is Tokada Kiamaniwi, which means woman who walks toward the future. I'm excited today to be here to share some of my story, some of my family's story, in particular around the work that we've done at Pidimakaska, a lake that is very important to us personally, and very important to our broader community. I think I have a couple photographs that I'm going to share, to get us started. So this is a photograph of this is an image that a Dakota artist, Marlena Miles, created for the Minneapolis Park Board. And I share this for a few reasons. One, because it's a really cool image and it's created by a Dakota person. And also just one of the cool things about this work that we've done, and I'm gonna share a lot more, but over the past 5 years, we've built a relationship with the Minneapolis Park Board. And a cool result of that work is we've been able to connect local government, both the park board and some other local agencies, with Dakota businesses and artists with some of the work that they do. So this is an image of B'dai Makaska, and it has a Dakota feel to it because it's made by a Dakota artist. Can you show the next photograph, please? This is a picture of me and my son. I love this photograph. This was taken just a couple of weeks right after B'dai Makaska, when the name was formally changed at the state level. And so this is me and my son at the time. He was very little. He was born actually at a birth center overlooking B'dai Makaska, which is significant for a number of reasons. Because of my family's relationship with the lake. Next picture, please. This is a more recent picture. He did not tag that. He's 3. His penmanship is not quite that good yet, but we're working on it. I share this in part, both of these pictures, this picture and the last picture, to share. This is why I do this work. This is. It's for my son, it's for my nieces and nephews, it's for the kids in our community. I want my son to grow up, and I want all of our kids to grow up knowing who they are, especially as Native people, having a sense of their role in community and having confidence in who they are as Lakota, Dakota, Anishinaabe, whatever their heritage, being proud of that identity. Because unfortunately, my sister and I have a twin sister, Dr. Kate Bean, and we did a lot of this work together. We struggled, Cheryl shared some of my accomplishments within the education system. My background wasn't always a success story when it comes to education. My sister and I both dropped out of high school when we were not even 16. We were struggling within a dominant education system where we didn't feel that we didn't learn anything about our people. We didn't feel that the education system was intended for us, and we rebelled. And it wasn't until we went back to school later. It wasn't until we really started better understanding our connection to place, to land, started studying our language, that we really started doing well. We were able to find ourselves and then make the education system work for us. And so I still do a lot of work within education because I know the doors that can open. I know the opportunities that are out there, but I also know how hard it can be to navigate. And so that's a personal passion of mine, and something that it's very much connected to this story and why I'm doing this work. Next picture, please. So this is a Google image of B'dai Makaska. As you'll see, it's a pretty big lake. It's the largest lake in Minneapolis, the most visited lake in Minneapolis. The surrounding homes are, like most lakefront properties, it's primarily wealthy, primarily white-owned housing. When my sister and I got involved with the name restoration, this is a conversation that had the idea of restoring the Dakota name B'dai Makaska, the idea of changing the name from Lake Calhoun. That conversation had been happening for years, but it hadn't quite gained the right momentum. It just hadn't happened. And then in the summer of 2015, my sister and I were both asked by 2 different Minneapolis Park Board members to sit on a local committee called a Community Advisory Committee, a CAC. The park board members who asked each of us, we have different last names. I don't think they knew we were sisters, and that's okay. They didn't need to know. I don't know that they had ever had a Native person on any of these committees, and now they had two. And we were asked because they knew that we had, worked within our Native community, but also within the broader communities. And my sister as a historian, and then myself with some of my legal background and philanthropic background, they wanted to get that perspective. But also when we started telling them about our family's connection to this lake. So B'dai Makaska in the mid 1800s, the 1830s, my grandfather, Makpia Wichasha, Cloudman, and my grandmother, Champa Dutawin, or Chokcherry woman, they led a village at B'dai Makaska. It was an agricultural village. It was there for about 10 years. And I didn't know anything about this growing up. I did not grow up in the Twin Cities. Like many Dakota people, our people were exiled from the state of Minnesota after the War of 1862, and my tribe is now located in South Dakota. And so like many Native folks, like many Dakota folks, I didn't grow up here, but I moved back. I came back and started learning these stories, and I learned about my family's village. And I learned, in large part, my sister has done a ton of work around this with her research around our family, but learned about the story of this village that hadn't been told, the Dakota perspective. From the non-Native perspective, this village was seen as a failure. And yet when you dig in and do the research, which is what we did, you learn that the story is much different. The story that we learned is that our grandfather and our grandmother turned to agriculture during a time when our people were starving. And that during the 10-year span that this village existed, not a single person in the village died from starvation. Now, when you look at what was happening both before and after that time, that's huge. The other thing that we learned was during the time that they had this village, nobody from surrounding villages starved either. And that's because one of the reasons this village had been seen as a failure was that our people didn't save food to last as long as folks thought that it should, years and years and years. In fact, they didn't, because they were giving it away. And so to us, this story of generosity, the story of resilience was powerful and something that we felt people should know about. So when my sister and I, fast forward, when my sister and I were both asked to sit on this community advisory committee, we came armed with that knowledge. We came armed with the knowledge of our history, of our people, of these stories that we could share with people who lived around the lake who had no idea. I think when the park board members asked us to join, they may have thought that we would ask for a plaque, that we would ask for a sign acknowledging the village, which was called Heate Otunwe, Village to the Side. And we didn't. We asked for more than that. We did ask for that, but we asked for more. They had told us that they wanted us to, as a broader CAC, to utilize an equity lens. And so we asked them what that meant. And they didn't have an answer that we felt satisfied our needs, especially considering, my sister and I were two of the only people of color on the CAC. These CACs normally are made up of wealthy white residents. They're not accessible. Their meetings are in the evenings. It's hard for families, especially, we were young moms. It's hard to attend them. They can go really late at night. And so we said, you know what, if you want to utilize an equity lens, we're going to work with a local nonprofit who specializes in racial equity, and we're going to go out into community, and we're going to ask community what they want here at B'dai Makaska, what they were calling Lake Calhoun. Because the idea was we were supposed to be bringing recommendations to this park board on a 20-year vision of what should happen in this place. And so we went out and we talked to people. We talked to people from the Native community. We talked to people from non-Native communities. We talked to people from immigrant communities. We talked to people from a lot of communities. And we asked them, what would make you feel, what would bring you to this lake? What would make you feel like this was a place that you were included? And when we told them the history of the lake, when we told them the history of our family's village. And then when we told them the history about John C. Calhoun, which I'll get to in just a minute, what ended up happening was we had a whole list of these are the things that we want the park board to do at the lake. But at the number one equity recommendation that came out, and this is from people from lots of different communities, was that the name needed to be changed from John C. Calhoun and that it should be restored to Bde-Makaska. Now we knew, and so again, John C. Calhoun, for those of you who don't know, huge proponent of slavery, not just a proponent of slavery, but an active, participant in that system. He drafted the Indian Removal Act, established the BIA under the War Department. He was the vice president. He was a South Carolina senator and then a vice president under Andrew Jackson. He was not a friend of African American or Native folks by any means. In fact, he caused a lot of damage. And so when we told people about him, they didn't know. They didn't know. Many folks didn't know at that time. Again, this was 2015. And so dialogue started happening. We started going out and talking to people in neighborhood groups, and we ended up what we ended up learning was the park board didn't actually have. So this is where processes and navigating systems comes in, and the importance of doing this and building relationships. The park board didn't actually have the authority to change the name and to restore the Dakota name. But what we learned was when we parsed out what that path might look like, when we met with attorneys from different governing agencies, what we found was that while the park board didn't have the authority, and it was determined that the State Department of Natural Resources did, but that it would have to come through the county, there was a multi-layered process basically that was laid out. But that every level along the way, they were going to look to the park board for guidance because they were the stewards, the formal legal stewards of the lake at the time. So we started there. And what ended up happening when we started with this, we asked the park board, we told them this is the recommendation we were making. At first, we had one person on board out of the park board. At the end of this process, we had not only unanimous support from the park board, but we had park board members who, when we started, thought we were wasting everyone's time and that this wasn't an important issue. We had folks who had gone into retirement and who had started with that kind of perspective, who started volunteering their time. So we started at the park board, we got approval there, and then we went up the chain of the process that was laid out for us. We went to the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners, and then to the state DNR, which eventually went to the federal level. There's a lot of work all along the way in navigating relationships, lots of public testimony. It was a lot of time, and this was all time that we were volunteering out, in our evenings and weekends and when we could, to make this happen because it was important to us. Can you, next slide, please, next picture. And I'll pick it up a little bit. I know we're short on time. So this is just a picture to show. This is when we finally went through all these steps, got to the state level, they approved it, and we got to put in these new signs, which again, these new signs were created actually by a Dakota woman-owned company that is now in partnership with the park board. And these are local community members, some of our family, Uncle Art Owen, who came and did a blessing, and people were really excited about this change. Next picture, please. And this is a sign. So during this process, one of the things we learned was that there were multiple processes within the process. So not only were we going to look at changing the lake name and restoring the Dakota Lake name, but we needed to change the parkway signs too, which was, again, a whole nother process. But we did it. We made that happen actually before the lake name was finalized, which was exciting. Next slide, please. This is an image of some of the public art. So this is just to show, again, we continue to work with the park board. This process that we've gone through with them, we never wanted a plaque. We wanted Dakota presence. So when you come to Minneapolis and you drive around Budemakaska Parkway, you see our language. You can see it from the side of the road. This is the name of our village. We have lots more pieces that we're incorporating, including some video stories with current local Dakota people sharing about Dakota contributions and presence. Next picture, please. This is my son, again, and just this is an example of some of the public art. And the kids love this. I mean, they love being able to learn the different animals and plants all in Dakota, and they can touch them, and it's really fun. Next picture, please. I share this picture to share that this was a family effort. And again, when we talk about some of the difficulties that we're navigating, I continue to work with the park board and trying to help them to make their processes more equitable, more accessible, especially to families. So these are the meetings that we attended. As you'll see, they didn't have childcare, and so we brought our kids with us. And that's just what we had to do. And not only that, but our kids became engaged in the process. One of the biggest challenges we heard from people was that Budemakaska was too hard to say. And when we were challenged with that, we would bring my 3-year-old niece, who's in some of these pictures, we would bring her up to the podium, whether it was the park board, a county meeting, a neighborhood association meeting, what have you. And my 3-year-old niece would lead the crowd through saying Budemakaska. And you know, we would say, if this 3-year-old can do it, so can you. And then we would also share, and this is why it's important. You know, this is Dakota is the original language of this place, and our language is in jeopardy. And we want these kids to be able to speak it, and we want them to hear it and to have it visible here in our city. And so that was part of getting the work recognized and celebrated, and having our kids be a part of it. Next picture, please. And so this is just, again, that image from Marlena Miles, who's a local Dakota artist. The one last thing I'll share is, you know, throughout this whole process, it was not easy. Every step along the way, we thought, okay, we've done it, and something else would happen. After the state DNR and then the federal DNR approved the restoration of the name Budemakaska, we had there was a small group of opponents who went by the name Save Lake Calhoun, who filed a petition in court, which ended up going up to the state Supreme Court, where they challenged that we did not use a proper process. They made a statutory argument, basically, and said that the state did not have the authority to restore the name. That was really frustrating, especially as Native folks who, you know, we met with attorneys, we met with government officials and said, you know, we know we're gonna have to jump through hoops, we're gonna spend time and we're gonna jump through the hoops and we're gonna do it, tell us the process, to have that process then be challenged. Well, the state came to bat and said, no, we're gonna vouch for the process. In May of 2020, just a couple months ago, the Supreme Court did find in our favor. And so we now have, not only is Budemakaska the formal recognized name of the lake, but we also have a process so that we can do some more work like this. And with that, I'd love to turn things over to Kevin. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Yeah, I know we're kind of quick on time, so you can't see my face. It's okay. It's all good. But you can see me after a little bit. But I know Carrie's kind of running the slide here, so we could kind of move forward. So I'll do a quick introduction. Hamadaki api makat ikilia himie chante washte nape chuzapilo. That's my Lakota name, and it's close to Earth. My English name is Kevin Killer. It's good to be on this presentation with you all. Thank you to Cheryl, you know, amazing mentor. You know, she's an amazing resource for our community. Thank you, Carly, for that amazing presentation. You know, and I think it really gives you like a, a context of like what this looks like in an urban setting. And, and this is kind of like what my presentation is what it looks like in a rural setting. But in both of these presentations, you think about some of the like, where Minnesota tends to be a little bit more progressive liberal city. The area that we were working in was a little bit more conservative, Republican city. And not that politics has anything to do with this, but it does everything, politics has everything to do with this. And sorry about that. And so I think you can see me now, but no worries. But really making sure that, this is how we understand this, because, at the end of the day, as the topic of the series, it's always being active, whether in an urban setting or a rural setting or reservation setting. It's always about kind of, understanding what we're up against. And so thank you, Cheryl, again, for giving us this platform to present this. This was done in 2014. And I can begin the slides. So if you want to just, if you want to go to next, if you want to go to next, Carrie, and see what comes up. So sorry, mine's just kind of running slow. Okay, I can do it. So basically, yeah, as Cheryl was mentioning, how it started, it was through partly the Native Youth Leadership Alliance, and really looking at, a bigger context of how this was kind of built out, of how, how do we really look at what name changes are, who's doing this kind of stuff. The Washington Redskins, that name change came up in 2014. There was a lot of push around that. And what is the real history behind a lot of this stuff, and as you see in the last presentation, there's a lot of context about, who things are named after, and, what is the true history and what is the reflection on that, especially this day and age, where we're talking about, what is BLM, what is the arguments of BLM, what is solidarity, what is allyship, but also what is at the root of that, what is the conversations, what is the history behind that, what are people frustrated about? And really, as we go through this presentation, we can do that. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, so Shannon County, that's what it was at the time. It was, I was a state rep. There's me, Kevin, that's when I was in office. That was the picture of Shannon County. And that was the picture, the other one with a sweater. I usually go around like that, I campaign like that. That was, I was doing that in my community, but that was the bumper stickers that we had out for our thing. That's kind of a compare and contrast, so that's a good one. Next slide, please. And the next one is of Anna Diaz. She's on this, she's actually the president of the county commission right now. She is a founding member of NILA, and she's actually a Oglala College graduate. This presentation was done by Oglala Tribal College member, Jesse Shortbull. So this is all basically rooted in tribal colleges. Anna Diaz, she's a member of the county commission. She's the president of the county commission. She's the youngest ever elected in the South Dakota history. And she, she kind of helped lead this effort. Next slide, please. And this is kind of like we're South Dakota, South Dakota, this is the state that we're working in. Like we're in the southwest corner. This is where Lakota County is. Next slide, please. And this is the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So basically this is the district that we represented it. And if you cut this in half, if you look at it, you cut it in half, that's basically what Shannon County was. The other two counties are Jackson and Bennett. And there's history behind all that kind of stuff. Bennett was apparently an old farmer. That's kind of where that history is. All that kind of stuff. Where Dr. Crazy Bull's from, it's just adjacent to Pine Ridge, Rosebud. And that's actually called Todd County. And I think that was named after, say, the president's son or something like that. So yeah, there's kind of interesting things about that. Next slide, please. So yeah, so this is basically who Peter Shannon was. He doesn't look like me. You saw a picture. He doesn't look like Jesse. He doesn't look like Anna. And this is basically who he was. He was a territorial judge. He was actually from Pennsylvania. He rode the coattails of Lincoln in the 1860s, and by doing that, they put him in different positions. I think he ran for a congressional seat over in Pennsylvania, and then he wasn't successful at that. He was an attorney. He actually began getting into law. He helped President Lincoln's campaign. Lincoln appointed him as a territorial judge. And I could, and you know, and he was here for maybe like in the 1870s to until he actually got well, he was actually removed from the bench. And this was, you know, he was there in this position, but he was, you know, these are some of the complaints against him. You know, the Dakota Territory lawyers wrote a list of grievances against Shannon and proved them on March 25th, 1881. The charges were insulting attorneys and parties in open court, offensive partisanship in criminal cases, has endeavored by threats and other coercive means to secure endorsements of attorneys for reappointment, has been publicly intoxicated, and the habit has grown on him, and writing fictitious letters. So he wasn't like the most, you know, like, you know, most noble person, but, you know, where he comes into kind of play is, if you go to the next slide, please, is where he comes into play is actually on this Edmonds Commission. And the Edmonds Commission kind of oversaw the whole history, everything of this community, and basically looking at how do we, you know, how do we get these Lakotas to kind of sign over their land. So, you know, he was and they, I think it was tried after in 1877, after the Solar Star Act, you know, they tried something there. But it wasn't successful because they needed 3/4 of all males. But, you know, when they appointed Shannon to this commission, you know, I basically compare it, if you've seen Terminator 2, where the guy finds the arm and he finds the microchip, and it leads to this whole alternative universe because he found those two things. Basically, the research that Shannon did is kind of a comparison to that, because what he did is that he got the research, he, you know, he laid out the groundwork of how to actually set up this commission to do it. But it wasn't successful because, again, he kind of did some shady things around getting kids as young as 5 to actually sit there and, you know, sign as a consenting adult. You know, he went out and went and recruited at the Pioneer Day School, just different things like that, and just really showed you the lengths that they're willing to go to. And there's actually a next slide, please. There's actually, yeah, here's the timeline of events. So you had the Fort Laramie Treaty, the Indian Appropriation Act, the Custer Expedition, you know, and that's when they actually found gold, and that's where they saw it was going to be lucrative. And then they said, okay, well, how can we get this land back from the natives? You know, like the Senate, you know, basically wanted to try to figure out how do we get the Black Hills. You know, in 1877, Shannon County actually was laid out. Even though South Dakota wasn't a state until 1889, they began to start laying out what the different counties' names were. So even then, like in 1877 or 1875, sorry, I can't, mine's coming in good. But 1875, the Shannon County was born. In 1876, Battle of Little Bighorn, and then, you know, you see this timeline of events. Like, you know, you get defeated at Little Bighorn, then they get mad, do the Indian Appropriations Act of 1877, Solar Star Act. So that's where this research kind of comes in. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the reservation. This is how it used to be. This was kind of like where they were negotiating. This is what they were looking at, and this is what you know, Shannon was basically trying to reduce the yellow areas to the red areas. So next slide, please. And this is with the original treaty territory. I think this was the original lands. That's how far, you see how far he went, you know. This goes all the way into Montana, North Dakota, I think Nebraska, even down to Colorado. And, you know, it showed how big our area was, you know, and to go from that to this showed you the context. Okay, next slide, please. So again, you know, the Edmonds Commission, opening of the Great Sioux Reservations, what were they offering? The commission achieved its goals? No. And accusation, threats, and misconduct. Next slide, please. And, you know, again, the investigation, you know, that's what they took these findings, they took them to the Congress back then, and they opened up an investigation to see if this was legal or not. And actually Congress found that it wasn't legal. And next slide. And one of the people that testified against him was actually this Captain George Sword, who was an Indian agent, but he saw how unethical the means that they went through, all this kind of stuff, and he actually testified against the next slide, against this reverend, who was kind of helped leading those efforts, and against Shannon himself. So they said, okay, this isn't a ethical way to do this. You guys can't force these, this tribe to sell their land, these tribes to sell their land. So this isn't valid. Next slide, please. So yeah, so this, and Crook was there as well. There's counties named after him. He was kind of unethical as well, and he was partly leading some of this conversation and stuff. So next slide. So yeah, so basically in South Dakota, what we had to do was actually take a petition around and get signatures, and it wasn't a simple majority that you see in democracy actually to change the county name. It had to be 2/3 of all county residents voting in that election that it would take. So basically a 66% margin. Those are some of the rules. Next slide. So what we did is that, we created this campaign. We got elders, the elder Barbara Youngbull, Bull Bear. She's no longer with us, but, she actually, she was a big proponent of this. And we thought, okay, well, we got to get, this is like for the first time in her life that she had an option to choose something that was closely related to her. It wasn't rooted in this history, it wasn't rooted in that. It was actually related, something that she could see. And I think she lived about 90. So you think about, in 90 years, this is the first time you get to see something that's closely related to what you believe, So the funny thing about that, there was 8 people who didn't want the name change, but and it's funny because I actually took the petition around, and 2 of them were actually named Shannon. So they didn't want to, their first names were Shannon, so they didn't want the name Shannon to be changed. But other than that, I mean, people were more overwhelming surprised, and they really were supportive of doing this. Next slide, please. So yeah, county dynamics, this is like a majority Native county. This is one of the areas that we can continue to look at, and just making sure that, we had the numbers on our side. They kind of went 80%. Well, actually, this was one of the most Democratic counties in the United States. And it was uniquely located just to us. This was our community. And next slide, please. And so, yeah, this is our president on the left-hand side, and this is a community member signing the petition. So we went around, got out signatures. It was really good. One of the unique things is that about this is that, it was in South Dakota, it's a good way to register people to vote through the petition process, because people can sign a petition and register to vote at the same time, and it will count. And so that was one of our strategies, is to kind of help turn out, this people's interest, getting them to think about something they could choose, something they could believe in, and also just making sure that they're participating in this process, because it's really, this is the people doing this process, So, and the win number, not the win number, but the number that we had to get to, like when you do ballot initiatives, all this, you always have to take into account of unregistered voters. And usually the threshold in South Dakota was around 10 to 15%. So you would get, like if you had to get 1,000 signatures for this to count, you would have to get 150 more to, make sure that you kind of take into account that threshold. But for our county, because we have various methods of purging voters, and also because people are unregistered, they think they're registered, our actual number was 25%. So we had to connect with 25% of all registered vote, or all members who thought they were registered to vote, to really get this on the ballot. So we needed 1,167 signatures, and so we said that, okay, well, we need actually 1,840 something signatures, and we actually got that, so we went there, we met it, all that. Next slide, please. And so we turned the signatures in. It was kind of funny, like they're all surprised. They didn't expect us to bring all those sheets. Next slide, please. So yeah, South Dakota elections, Dakota County, we actually, we we helped to do this. Yeah, so we helped to kind of lead this effort moving forward and making sure that this was a historic effort. And actually, the voting margin was 80% to 20%. And I think when the final ballots were counted, it was around 82%. That's with all that. But even then, you had to go to the legislature, you had to go to the governor to get it changed. So we actually brought it to the governor. We brought it forward, and it was a really unique process, and it was something that was historic and it just woke a lot of people up in our community, And I think, how it relates to a lot of the stuff, as I said earlier, is that you begin to understand like the context of history. And, through my fellowship, through my, everything I've done, I actually got to go to Africa, and, that was last year. But one of the stops on my trip was actually Ghana. And when I went to Ghana, we got to visit the Slave Coast, all that kind of stuff. But you see, how intricate the system is to really oppressing, to really taking advantage of either free labor or taking advantage of free land or taking advantage of all this kind of stuff. But you see the enforcement mechanisms kind of put in place. Sorry, that's my dog. But you see the enforcement mechanisms put in place of how, of how the enforcement mechanisms are put in place to keep this kind of history in place. So anytime we try to question it, it becomes, oh, that's not right, or this is not valid, or we got this record. But you begin to explore some of this meaning and things behind this, then you begin to really realize the full context. That hey, this started in 1400, this started in 1300s, with all the way back to the Papal Bull, all this kind of stuff, and you begin to understand how a lot of this is kind of it's rooted in that. So I want to say thank you to Carly for doing her work. Thank you to all our community members. Thank you for jumping on. Thank you to Cheryl for letting us do this. I know we only got an hour, so this is a little longer presentation. I try to keep it short, but yeah, I want to leave time for questions. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, both Kevin and Carly. We do have a couple of questions. One was, how could this be done? I think Kevin in particular, because you were petitioning. Do you have any insights if people want to do something? We don't know how long the current pandemic situation is going to, stay in place. People will still want to be active. Do you have advice on how people could do that in the current environment? Is there an accommodation that's being made around petitioning and outreach?
I think it depends on the state that you're living in. South Dakota, for example, they're trying to be safe. They're trying to move things forward, but also being safe about it. So again, it's paying attention to the timelines of that and really planning for that, because that was the biggest thing, is that we had kind of time on our side within a month. But with COVID, I would say plan like 3 months ahead. And I'm not sure what state Martina is from. But really looking at the processes of that petition process, and really allocating, okay, you're going to have a plan, because with campaigns you can basically just lay out one plan and it will go that way. But with COVID, you got to basically have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, because you just never know how it's going to impact the community. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. I think that scenario planning. Carly, what would you advise?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think the importance of working with local nonprofits is huge. So there's a lot of opportunity. One of the things that we saw working with local government, my sister and I were on this committee as individuals. And so we didn't have a lot of resources. Our biggest resource was our time, and then helping to make connections. So helping government agencies understand that they didn't have the relationships that they needed to do real community engagement, but we knew who they could reach out to. And so connecting them with local nonprofits who had those relationships, and had the resources, and often ask for resources from them to be paid to do this, right? To bring folks together and create movement in that way.
Thank you. I think so paying attention to the timeline and process, and then paying attention to the relationships that can help you do your work. So we had a really great question asked, and it's something that I've thought about myself. How do you decide when you want to engage what are essentially colonial systems? So, you know, you're working with the legislature, you're working with the Park Service. These are institutions that we as Indigenous people, you know, recognize are built on colonial power and the taking of our resources. So I think share, you know, what made you decide to work within that system, which is kind of the theme of this.
I mean, I could start, you know, I think one of the things for us in 2014 was that we had a, you know, a Senate campaign, and I didn't get to that part, but there was a Senate campaign that kind of aligned with this and understanding, okay, well, what, again, the conversation of, you know, voting is harm reduction. You know, that's basically as simple as that. And, you know, participating in the system is harm reduction to a community that's being oppressed. And you know, being able to lay that message out through, you know, initiative, through, you know, endorsing a candidate, you know, myself, I was in office too at the time, you know, and saying that, hey, this is a good thing for our community to participate in. And this is something that we need to, you know, kind of understand that we're invested in this history, and we have an opportunity to take this power back, you know. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that with us, you know, with our example, is that we took the power back to rename ourselves. And that's one of the things that, you know, Nelson Mandela did when he actually took over the African National Congress. All this is that they went and renamed a lot of places that were named after South Africaners who were non-Black. So
Good. That's good insight. How about you, Carly?
Yeah, I think, you know, timing is huge. And I really appreciate that question right now, because I feel like the environment that we're in, you know, as nations, as, you know, rural, urban, on the national level, the timing is right for a lot of these conversations to be happening, and recognizing the work that has come before. So as I mentioned, you know, we weren't the first ones to bring the idea of you know, that Lake Calhoun that John C. Calhoun was a terrible person, and then that there was another name before. That conversation started before, but the timing was right when we started doing this work, in part because we had started building those relationships amongst systems and amongst people. There was a park board, you know, there was a turnover in park board members at a certain point. And so we had more folks who were in support toward the end than were at the beginning. And so there was a lot of work around having better representation, especially people of color, on the park board, and also at the county level. So that work on getting folks to come out and vote and advocate for better representation that was more aligned with our values was definitely part of the timeliness piece as well. Also, and I'll just add, when we started the conversation at the park board level, it was right after the shootings in Charleston, and that church was on Calhoun Street, and a lot of people didn't know that. And so when we shared that story, and then shared the story of John C. Calhoun and the fact that he'd never set foot in Minnesota, but who he was, and what the colonial system had done to the people, and then connected that to current context and talked about, you know, our Native kids graduation rates, and this is what we're hearing from Native experts. Our kids want to know who they want to be connected to their cultural identity. They want to feel celebrated. They want to be visible. You know, when we started connecting all of those things together, it worked, right? And it took time. You know, it took 5 years. But you just keep going. And there were days that we didn't know it was going to work. There were some, you know, at the county level, you know, we were getting ready to figure out how to file a petition, and we didn't even know what to do. And then the park board, based on all the work we had done with them, they went and filed the petition for us, so we didn't have to. You know, it was all building these relationships and these layers as we went.
So it sounds like in the context of working within the system, it was also having that vision that there was an outcome that you were seeking,
right.
and that you also really made sure you educated yourselves, right?
Yeah.
So that you could answer all the questions and make that commitment. So one of the things that I heard earlier, you talked about the equity lens and the connection to community. So how did you make that equity argument with people who weren't allies? Like in the case of Oglala, changing the name to Oglala Kota College or changing the name to Biddy Makaska. How did you bring equity forward?
I think with us, you know, and I know that Jesse's on the presentation too, so he's tuning in thinking, hey Jess and hey Amber. But one of the things that we did was that, you know, we actually framed it in the context of, okay, because it is a Republican majority state, you believe in local government, so this is a local government decision. And really bringing that home and saying that, and the only people that can participate this is the residents of Shannon, now Oglala County. And that envisioning piece is so important because, you know, when you had those bumper stickers out there, it really helped people reimagine something different in a political context. And I dropped some links in the chat here. And if you go, first one's Oglala County School District. And now that any kid that goes to school here now is a student of Oglala County School District versus being a student of Shannon County School District. So it just sounds better. It's just all that. And the second one is actually some of the history on that, who was Peter Shannon and all that, what I was referencing. But it's, you know, that's where I would say that's how you bring equity to kind of frame that. So.
Oh, that's a good answer to that. So making sure that you understand the motivations of the community that you were working with, because it is kind of a miracle when you can do that in South Dakota. So how about you, Carly?
Yeah, I would just add, even though, like, yes, the Twin Cities is a progressive place, but we did have, we actually had quite a few folks who, especially folks who live around the lakes, who, while they may claim to be progressive, they weren't in support of this. It was a change, right? They were worried that, you know, there were actually full-page ads that were taken out that said that we were trying to drain the lake. Like, those were the words they used. That these activists are trying to take away our memories and they're trying to drain the lake. And we weren't trying to do that. And so what we did was, you know, really just lift up the power of storytelling and connection. And so sitting down, you know, we would walk into rooms with folks where we knew that people were not on board with us, and we told them our story. You know, we told them our family story, and then again, we connected it to current context. And we said, we recognize that you're fearful of change, but change isn't always bad. Like, the stories that haven't been told, our story needs to be told, and we're not taking anything away from you, because that was the fear. They feared that we were going, that what their ancestors did to us is what we were going to do to them, that we were going to take something away from them. And so we had to share with them that, no, we're actually making your connection to this place richer. Like, now you're speaking the language of the water, of this land. When you look at it, it looks different. You have a stronger connection. So we tried to build up on the collective love that we had for the place and help folks understand. And that's where we started to see hearts and minds start to shift when people recognized that and when they felt it. And that was a really powerful kind of moment.
Thank you. I'm going to end on that collective love note, because I think that there is a place there for us to connect to the land and connect to place, and we actually can help allies, help give them permission to make that connection for themselves, because that's often lacking in their experience. So I want to thank you, Kevin and Carly, for sharing your powerful stories with us and for giving us some guidance on the ways that our participants and activists can move forward with visions that they have of things that they can do. I invite all of the participants to check on YouTube soon. We'll have this posted there. We also posted our previous presentations with Twyla Baker, the president of Nueta Hidatsa Sanish College, Sarah Eaglehart, who shared about how to, work with racial conversations. And then the last time we had an Indigenous Speakers Series, Jay's Echo Hawk shared about the census and voting. So those are very excellent presentations as well. You can go to the College Fund's website to our advocacy page and see our upcoming events. Our next event in 2 weeks is going to be focused on direct activism, how to be a direct activist, and also how to live a life of joy, because living a life of joy, particularly for Indigenous peoples, is an act of activism. It's an act of rebellion to show that we can live a wonderful life of joy, even in the face of many, many challenges. So thank you all very much, and have a good rest of your week. Thank you.